Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. Today we have a review of Barenpark from Mayfair Games. This is a 2 to 4 player tile placement game where you're building a bear park and expanding that bear park and filling it with bears.
Let's talk about the components, and then we'll talk about the gameplay.
Yeah, the gameplay is simple.
Yeah, very simple to play. You have a game board in the center. On the game board, you're going to have a representation of 3 different sets or types of tiles. You have the park tiles, which are here, which are all your green ones. They are represented by the wheelbarrow.
Right.
And then you have your cement truck, which has your 4 different types of bears, basically.
Yeah, sort of, and the more advanced elements that you might put in your park.
These are organized from top to bottom, from your highest number down to your lowest number. And then over here you have all your enclosures. These are represented by the excavator. And these are unique tiles.
Right, one of a kind for those.
The number of these that come into play is dependent upon the number of players in the game. So you're going to have a different number for each of these that you have. Also, each player is going to start with an entrance tile. The entrance tile has a set of icons on them. We'll go over what these icons mean. And then you have additional park tiles that you'll be able to acquire through the course of the game. 2 other sets of components. You have milestones that you can collect. There's 10 different milestones in the game. However, each game that you play is only going to use 3 of those. So there's some variability in there. And then you have all the bear statues. The bear statues are goals that you're going to be trying to achieve quicker than the other players by finishing out a tile. It's kind of the reward for finishing a tile.
Yeah, there's a little bit of racing in this game to grab the higher point value tiles and rewards and end of game tiles as quickly as you possibly can.
Yeah. The game ends when any player finishes out 4 of the tiles. This being a tile, and then each additional tile will represent 1 of the 4 they have to place. How does the game work? At the start, you're going to give each player a very specific tile depending upon where they come in the player order. Being the first player, I start with the smallest tile, which is just a 1x1. So there's 4 steps that you can take in your turn. Some of them you will be able to, some of them you won't be able to, depending upon what you have and what you've placed. On your turn, you get to always place a tile, and that's 1 singular tile that you get to place. At the start of the game, each player is going to start with just 1 tile in front of them. However, there's going to be decisions that you'll be able to make in the game because you're going to have multiple tiles in front of you.
Right.
When you place a tile, you get to place it over any one of the areas on your board. Now, it needs to be noted, the very first tile that you place in the game can be anywhere, with one exception. You can never place over the pit.
Yes.
That's the final place that you'll be able to place when a board is complete. We'll get into that in a moment. Once you've placed your tile, if it is on any type of icon, you get to do whatever the icon says. Now, in future turns, you have to place orthogonal to a place that you already have existing. So, first turn of the game, the only time in the game that you can place anywhere. When you place, you get to take one of many different actions.
Right.
So go ahead and talk about the wheelbarrow.
Yeah, if you cover up the wheelbarrow, you simply take one of these 4 basic tiles from that section of the board and add it not to your park, but next to your park.
To your supply, basically.
So as you can tell, as you use different shapes and size tiles, you might be able to cover up a couple different icons, taking multiple tiles from the board so you have more flexibility in future turns.
If you place over a cement truck, of course, you get to take one of these. And again, this is a race to get some of the higher value ones, because as you go and descend down through the stack, they go from 7 down to 1.
Right, and these represent basically 4 different types of bears. And more often than not, one of the goal tiles is going to be associated with one of those types of bears. So everyone's going to be gunning for that one. So if you can make the most points from it before anyone else, all the better.
Right. If you cover one of your excavator tiles, that's the orange excavator that you see here, which is not on your starting board, it's only acquired from your additional boards, you get to take any one of the one-off tiles that you see over here. Now, it needs to be noted that all these tiles also represent one of the different types of bears that you can have.
Exactly.
And they're called enclosure tiles.
And speaking of the excavator on the additional tiles, how do you get those additional tiles? Well, you cover up the construction workers. So when you cover them up, you're simply going to be able to take from one of these 2 stacks and add a tile to your park. When you take that tile, you can only take from one of the top 2, and then you can add it anywhere orthogonal to any tiles that you already have in your park. It's never going below your park entrance.
And there's definitely some strategy on how you want to place them, because placing like icons together or icons bunched in an area will give you quicker benefits to pull tiles a little bit quicker when you place over them. All right, that's the very first 2 steps. It's placing a tile and then evaluating the icon underneath it. The third thing that you can do on your turn is if you finish out a tile and you've placed everywhere on the tile covering up all the different icons and locations, if the only thing you have left is this, you get to claim one of the bear statues.
Right.
Those bear statues start from 16 down to 1. Again, those are victory points. So the quicker that you cover a tile and complete it, the more points you're obviously going to get from doing so. And the last thing you can do is collect a milestone.
Exactly. You can collect a milestone by just evaluating whether or not you've achieved any of the 3 milestones that are out on the table. If you have, you get to take the top tile from that stack. Again, those are the higher value tiles, so the quicker you do it, the better.
To give you an idea, the 3 milestones we have out, one is for having 3 tiles that have koala bears on them. The second one is having 1 from each different stack in the cement row.
Right.
And the last one is having a river that connects from end to end, 3 of them connecting to each other.
Which can be a tricky thing to achieve in this game.
Yep.
And then finally, on your turn, if you don't have a tile to place,
yes,
you can always take a tile from the basic area.
Yep.
So if you're not covering up an icon,
yep,
you're always able to take one of these tiles. Also, it should be noted, even if you cover up a cement truck or the excavator, you can choose to take any tile, any lesser tile, basically.
Yep. So the game will end when one player covers up 4 of their boards and completes them. Each player at the table will have 1 more turn in order to try to fill up as much as they can. And then you're going to simply look at your boards and count up all the victory points that are on the tiles and any of the milestones that you've collected.
Yep.
That's the game. It takes about 30 minutes to get through.
Yeah, it's a short, streamlined game, and like you said at the beginning, it's great for families. It can also be pretty competitive, too, if you want to play it that way. With 4 players, things get pretty racy, if you will, in terms of getting tiles when they're still out there.
Yep. Let's go to the review. I'm going to talk about 4 things that I didn't like about the game. Now, none of these things have any bearing about the gameplay itself. It's more aesthetic with the game. Number 1, this is the insert they give you. This is an awful, awful insert. I don't know why Mayfair did this, but it goes in here, caddy corner, and then you're just supposed to loosely put all the tiles
It is a little
back
strange,
in there.
I will
And
say that.
There's 130 plus tiles in the game, so you're going to want to have these organized together so you can quickly put it back together when you're done and then reset it up. The other problem is they give you no bags in the game, so you're basically on your own to bag it up and put it away when you're done. There's also no player aid in the game. Now, there's only 4 steps, so for people like us who play a lot of games, it's not a big deal. But for those people that are learning the game, or maybe families that don't play a lot of board games together, this is going to appeal to those type of people. So it'd be nice if they knew the 4 different actions they would have to take on their turn, or could possibly take on their turn. The last portion that really bugs me is that on the park area, you have a misprint. They tell you specifically how many tiles you need to use depending upon the number of players, and they've misprinted on one of these things. Now, I've read in some of the forums that they're not going to send these to buyers, but you can get it in a reprint of the game. So,
and it is correct in the rules, right? It's just a
it is correct in the rules.
board.
It's not printed correctly on here, which is these are basically telling you how many of each stack you need in there. Having said that, the gameplay itself, this is fantastic. This is the same designer that did Emotep, and he also did Sushi Go, which are 2 really, really strong family-style games as well.
And this is too, for sure. Like I said, like Jeremy said, there are some things kind of nitpicky little things that it's not really bears. It doesn't really bear on our
pun intended
review of absolutely no pun intended. It doesn't have an effect on our review for the game, but we did want to mention those things. One thing I would also point out too, before I get to my pros, if you're approaching this as a family game, it is important to remember these tile stacks do diminish. Yeah. There's a situation that you can get yourself into where these little 1 pieces, if they're gone and you have individual spots that can't be covered by anything but this,
you're in trouble.
You're not going to finish your park. So once you hit that wall, that can be kind of disappointing for a player, but you just got to remember from the very beginning, it's competitive. Everyone's gunning for these things all at the same time, and there's limited numbers of everything.
Yes.
So that you go into the game with that in mind, and you should be fine.
But that also doesn't mean that you can't win by not finishing out your board. If
True.
you do race well enough to be able to complete boards or other boards and get those tiles, and then also be very strategic on the tiles that you pick here, because these range between 8 and 6. So if you're picking some of the higher tiles, you of course are going to gain points back in that way. What else do you have to say about the game?
Well, in terms of pros, I think it's a great, great family game. This, for me, This is one of those games I can pull out and play with anyone. Jeremy and I can play this, and that'll be a more competitive game. I can play this with kids and family, and it will be a very sort of, everyone can get it and understand it. Like you said, even without a player aid, it's a very, very simple game to play. You're just placing a tile and taking a tile, or maybe even more tiles. Very satisfying puzzle that's going on here too.
Yeah.
I love puzzly games, and this has layers, because once you start adding these boards that expand your park, and you get to the idea of, oh, I can actually lay across some of these boards and make that work, it becomes very interesting. The rule about placing orthogonally to the tiles you've already placed make it really interesting too, because if you build your park out in one long stretch, that might not be as good as kind of clustering it so that you have more orthogonal tiles from which to play.
Yeah. The other thing to note, the game can be a little bit of AP prone, because players are going to be taking the tiles, especially when you have 3 or 4 tiles in your supply and you're constantly kind of puzzling it out, and then you're looking at the board to say, well, what can fit here, what can fit there. I would house rule it to say that you can't pick up any of these tiles. You're simply looking at it and trying to make that decision just from a visual check itself. So good game. This is a really cool game. Check it out. Quick to play, family, gateway, also enthusiast gamers. Touches just about everybody out there. If you guys have questions about it, make them in the comments below, or if you have something to say, let us know. Come see us at Origins, subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and everything else that we do here at Man vs. Meeple, and we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Season 1 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored by our friends at TMG Games. And at Cool Stuff Inc. Cool stuff in stock at coolstuffinc.com.